Welcome. My name is Doug Smith from Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and I work with the Exceptional Children or Special Ed Department, and I work as a behavior consultant. As educator, social emotional learning. So, what is educator social emotional learning? Educator SEL is the competencies that adults need in order to manage stress and create a safe and supportive environment. The skills and mindsets that adults need to effectively embody, teach, model, and coach student SEL and that overall well-being and emotional state of adults in school settings. So a couple of things that caught my attention was that their competencies, there's things that you need to put into place or need to have in order to manage that stress. When you can manage stress and anxiety and frustration, you create a safer and supportive school classroom environment. There are skills and mindsets that you need to teach, model, and coach students with social emotional learning difficulties. If you have difficulty with your own SEL or social emotional skills, then it's going to be difficult to teach those skills that our students need to navigate through the world today. And it is also looks at the overall well-being and emotional state of adults in the school settings. So why social emotional learning? So with SEL, we're going to be developing or cultivating strong relationships. We're going to model social emotional skills, and we're going to manage stress and reduce burnout. When we cultivate strong relationships, as I said a little bit ago, they contribute to a positive climate for both students and staff. So a strong relationship helps you to be able to talk to your students, help them work through problems, guide them through difficult times that they're having. Just being someone that's there for those students, as well as your staff members. A lot of times we think about just working with students as far as social emotional learning, but our staff members also need those social emotional skills or those relationships in order to have a positive working environment and create that safe environment that all students and staff members need. When we model social and emotional skills, we use healthy strategies for students, including how to navigate stress and frustration. Teachers who are able to model these skills have a safer learning environment and a more productive learning environment as well. When we manage stress and reduce burnout, as we develop our social emotional skills, we're better able to manage the stress and anxiety and reduce the burnout that often causes us to leave teaching. A lot of stress is involved with teaching. This is a people skill. You get all consumed in your work and with the students that you're working with and some of the stressors that they're going through. And you take that on as well. So a lot of times, some of us are really good at hiding what's bothering us or going on outside of the classroom when we're in that classroom. But in order to be able to provide for a safe environment and for a better opportunity for students, we must be able to manage our stress. So according to the Transforming Education, there are five high leverage practices. And these practices, much like the castle work, these practices are examining identity, explore emotions, cultivate compassionate curiosity, orient towards optimism, and establish balance and boundaries. Now, these apply to you as the educator. We're going to be looking at and focusing on you as the teacher, as the professional. So when we're looking at examining identity, so we're looking at defining values and pursuing purpose, investigating privilege and power, uncover bias, and reflecting on our work style. As I said earlier, teaching is a personal work. We must identify our values and examine our identities and mindsets and actions. Many of us struggle with their initial values and purpose. So think about why you went into teaching. What was the purpose for going into teaching? What was your purpose? What are some of the values that you hold in high regard as far as their teaching careers concerned? So educators are not immune to biases or stereotype beliefs. We must regularly examine the ways in which identities, values, and mindsets influence our actions. Educators are can more effectively serve our students when we look at those identities, values, and mindsets. When we look at those things and those reasons that we went into teaching. When we look at the values that we hold our students in high expectations for all students. We got to think about those things and examine those so that we are able to provide for a better learning environment and experience. When we're defining our values and purposes, the values help direct educators work toward intended purposes, helps identify obstacles that we may face, and helps identify productive ways to find solutions to overcoming those obstacles. So there's some things that come up every day in a classroom that we face and are difficult at times. So when we identify our values and when we look at our purpose, then we're more able to address those issues in a productive manner, positive manner, and help guide our students through those situations that they may be involved in. So when we're investigating privilege and power, we've got to look at privilege as being defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity available to a particular person or group. Oftentimes, having privilege conveys power. So sometimes we think about it, we look at, we're not immune to thinking about those kids that we work with that we may look at as having those privileges. And some of those kids may be better off socioeconomically, better off than other kids in your classroom. And some of our staff members may have that privilege and that power as well, because some of us have been in the field for very long times. Some of us are new to the field. So find those folks that have been there for a while and try to ask questions, look for guidance, and work with those folks and try to find you a mentor, someone that's willing to help you when you have questions and is willing to share some of their wisdom that they have. So when we looking at investigating privilege and power, we have to look at what impact that has on the school and how can we create a safe space for working with their students and for all personnel, staff as well. When we're uncovering biases is defined as a natural inclination for or against an ideal object group or individual. Some things that influence those biases are those socioeconomic status that we have or our colleagues have or our students have, the race and our ethnicity, educational background, and so forth. So those are just some things as far as uncovering biases. Oftentimes, we also have to work on reflecting on our work style. When we reflect on our work style, when we're self-aware of our values and our purpose, when we are self-aware of the privilege and power and our biases, we are more able to capitalize on strengths and ask supports for the areas that we need growth in. So it's a difficult job sometimes to ask for help. Reflect on your work style and determine what you do really well. You want to play to your strengths, of course, but don't be afraid to ask for help because there's someone there that is willing and able to help you. So self-awareness enables you to communicate challenges and seek support and strengthens team dynamics. And so when you ask for someone to help you, you're increasing your skills and your abilities, but you're also improving that team aspect of the school environment.
I like that because, I was just sitting here thinking as in my district before we were an itinerant. So I got moved to different schools and, I had to meet new people over again every time I got moved to schools. And it's one of those things. And I guess it could be in every aspect, but especially education, you're constantly learning new things and if you're open to new things, and your biggest resource is your coworkers. And Doug had mentioned that mentor, and though that's your most valuable resource. I have learned getting somebody that has been there, that and they are. I have never met somebody that was not more than willing to help new people. They would be thrilled to offer any help or their expertise. I've been on both ends of it. When I was a new teacher, We actually had to reflect yesterday in a meeting that we had about our mentor, and it's something I never really come out and thought, oh, this person was my mentor. I never called her my mentor, but when I think about it, she was, because I went to her and she took the time and showed me, how to do the paperwork and how to handle these students and things like that. And but also just a different way of looking at something. Even now, I mean, when I came to this job, just talking to people and getting different perspectives. So it broadens your knowledge on how to approach different, whatever you're faced with. And then as a veteran teacher, when I had new teachers come into my school, then I was more than happy to help them, because if you're willing and excited about learning and helping these kids, then your veteran teachers are going to be just as excited with you, and they'll do anything to help you. So just don't be afraid to reach out to those folks.
And that goes back also, I think, to asking for that help and providing that help. It goes back to building that. At the beginning, we were talking about building strong relationships and how strong relationships contribute to a positive climate for students and staff. So that build those relationships and be willing to work together and help each other. Thank you, Ms. Chastity. So our next area we want to look at is exploring emotions. And looking at exploring emotions talks about labeling our emotions, recognizing physical reactions to those emotions, and responding rather than reacting. And we'll briefly discuss each of these. Emotional awareness involves the way we recognize and make sense of our own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. More effective classroom management and stronger relationships with students are improved when we are able to explore our emotions. Sometimes we have feelings or emotions or things that are going on, and we don't know how to explain that, and it's simply because we don't have the vocabulary to tell what's going on. So I think one of the things that really helped me is developing that emotional vocabulary. And it also not only helps you to understand the emotions that you're feeling, but being able to have that vocabulary and having those things that you can teach your students. A lot of our students do not have the vocabulary to label the emotions that they're feeling. So it's important that you teach those young folks the vocabulary that goes along with that. So when we have that emotional vocabulary, we're more able to identify and articulate feelings and ensure that our emotional responses are productive and intentional. So another thing that we want to look at is emotions trigger physical responses. When you get angry or upset, your muscles tense sometimes. Your breathing may increase or your heart rate may increase. So those are some of the triggers or physical responses that we have to our emotions. And then if you're able to recognize those physical reactions and then tie them back into the emotion that you're feeling at that time, then you'll be more aware of what's going on with your body and what emotion you're feeling and how you're going to respond. So same thing with our students. We need to teach our young folks that, okay, sometimes when we get anxious or nervous, you get a funny feeling in your tummy. That's a physical reaction to being anxious. So be able to label that emotion and tie those physical reactions back to that emotion. So being able to recognize these physical reactions allows you to be able to understand what the stressors are and how you can more positively respond to those stressors. So we want to respond intentionally rather than reacting. So sometimes our emotions, if we get angry or frustrated, our emotions, our physical reaction or our response is a reaction. It's not a thought out response to the situation. Reactions occur instinctively without thought or consideration. And those responses are those intentional things that we do. And we realize what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how it will impact others. So when students have a problem or a behavior in your classroom that upsets you, slow down and think about what's going on and respond rather than reacting. I know it's difficult to do because the first thing you want to do is student jumps up and yells and cusses at you. You know, you get angry or scared or upset and you want to throw them out of the classroom. That is a reaction. But think about how you're going to respond. Think about what they're trying to communicate to you during that time that they're having a meltdown or they're having a behavior difficulty or that time that they're speaking rudely or unkindly to you. How are you going to respond to that? And sometimes it helps to have some responses kind of scripted or practiced so that you are responding and not reacting to the behavior. You are making a conscious effort to understand what's going on and responding in a way that is appropriate for yourself. And it helps the student to kind of, help themselves to self-regulate, to calm down. I guess we like to say old time, you say save face. It helps that kid to be able to understand that, this is a reaction to something in the environment. So how did my teacher respond? So mindfulness trains you to respond rather than react. And when we're talking about mindfulness, we're not talking about just spacing out or staring off into space or anything like that. Mindfulness is the practice of intentionally paying attention to your thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations in the present moment and without judgment. So when you're using mindfulness, you're thinking about what's going on now, what's going on in this environment. How am I thinking about this situation as has occurred? Sometimes we like to use it's an acronym for STAR, and STAR stands for stop, think, analyze, and respond. Stop what's going on, what you're doing. Look around the environment, see that everyone's safe, see what's going on. Think about the trigger or think about what emotion that you're feeling. Think about how am I going to respond, analyze a response. What am I going to do to respond to this young person? Is it going to be something that calms the situation? Is it going to be something that calms me back down? Or is it going to be something that may elevate or escalate a situation? So how are you look at the situation, analyze it, and then respond. Whatever you thought about doing, use that as a response. And then if this response works, then continue using that. If not, then you would stop, think, analyze, and respond again. So STAR is just an acronym to kind of help us think through a troubling time or a difficult time. So also mindfulness, back to mindfulness quickly, is a way to reduce stress and burnout. It builds confidence and again supports that supportive relationships and provides for better classroom management. Compassionate curiosity looks at exploring why behavior is happening and understanding that behavior is a form of communication. Compassionate curiosity allows us to approach each situation with empathy instead of judgment. So a lot of times we just, like I said, we jump to a reaction instead of a response. When we're looking at applying an asset-based lens, we're looking at focusing on the strengths rather than the weaknesses, which lead to better outcomes. We all have strengths, or we all have areas that we're really strong in, and we all have those, don't like to call them weaknesses, we all have those areas that we can grow in. So even in a weakness, you could have strengths within that area. So what are some of the strengths that we have? Some of us have very good communication skills. Some of us are really good at building those relationships, not only with our students, but with our peers and our colleagues as well. And when you're able to build those relationships, then you're showing those strengths that you have, and you're calling out or making your colleagues or staff aware of the strengths that they have, and you're playing to those strengths and you're helping them. Now, when we identify some weaknesses or some goals that we have, then we work together to try to improve in those areas. When teachers focus on students' strengths, like I said, rather than their weaknesses, you see those strengths. You don't see the limitations. You see the strengths and you play toward those strengths. And you help encourage those students and build those strengths and make them more successful. Culturally competent and educators elevate students' voices, and they provide materials and activities that draw on diverse cultures, capitalize on students' culturally grounded experiences, and promote more equitable conditions for their students. Equality and equity are not the same.
Giving every student the same is being equal, but it's not providing equality. Equality, what does that student need? Do you want me to share my Band-Aids, my Band-Aid analogy on
Yes,
that?
please.
Okay, so it's really cool. It's my favorite activity for at the beginning of the year. So a teacher goes into the class and hands every student a Band-Aid, just regular Band-Aid, clean, of course. and then she writes different ailments. So for example, you have a skinned knee, you have stomach ache, you have headache, just different illnesses or ailments that you could have. And so then she has the student, and you can have more than one of those, and then each student pulls out a piece of paper that's what their ailment is. Okay, and then she has them read them and say, okay, what's yours? And he says, I have a skinned knee. And she said, okay, well, I gave you a Band-Aid, does that want to fix it? He said, yeah. Okay, great. Then another student says, well, I have a headache. And she says, well, I gave you a Band-Aid, and then that should fix it, right? And they say no, and that's because you would need a Band-Aid is not going to fix a headache, so you're going to need something different. You're going to need some medication or washcloth or something different other than a Band-Aid to fix what you need. When I was being equal, I gave everybody a Band-Aid. And so then she goes on to explain throughout the year. She does it like at the first of the year, and then she goes on to explain that the students may see that Doug is going to need to go to the back of the room for a timeout chair for a few minutes. Chastity may not need that, but Doug is going to. Or I may read to Susie, and I'm not going to read to Julie, but I'm providing what that child needs. And it just kind of lets the students understand that they're going to see those different accommodations and things without them being questioned, I guess. So
Great. I love that analogy. And like Ms. Chastity said, not all students will get the same supports or will need the same supports. So it's individualized on looking at their strengths and their deficits that they have, and how can we address those so that they're successful in the school. Next thing we want to look at is listening with empathy. And listening with empathy is a process that requires us to take in more than just the speaker's words. When we pay attention, when we're looking at the speaker, when we're nodding our head, I can do that all day long and not hear a word that they're saying. When you're listening with empathy, you're not only are you attending to that person and paying attention and looking at them, but you are tuning into the emotions that are associated with the message that they're delivering. So that's called attuning skills. Attending is paying attention, looking at the speaker, and then attuning is listening not only to the words, but listen to the emotion that's attached. It could be the way their voice sounds. It could be the way their eyes light up sometimes when we're talking about things. It could be the way that their body, their posture, and things like that. When you're attuning, it means that you're listening with empathy and you're listening to understand. Some people listen just to hear things, while other people listen to understand. And we need to do that as educators. We need to listen to try to understand what is going on with our students and what's going on with ourselves as well. So listening with empathy helps you to understand, build, and maintain relationships, and it contributes to a student's sense of belonging and enables us to calibrate support to student needs. So like I said, not all students need the same supports, but when you listen to those students with empathy, you can determine what supports those students need. Sometimes a big thing, a key thing to working with students, special needs, regular students, staff as well, look at their behavior as communication. Viewing behavior as communication allows us to embrace the opportunities to respond to students as whole humans rather than responding to the behavior. So when we recognize the reason behind their behaviors, then it's easier to respond in a compassionate, empathetic way. So what this means is, behavior is a form of communication. What is that student trying to communicate to us? What are the stressors that they're feeling? What are the emotions that they're going through? What are the difficulties that they're having? They may not have the emotional vocabulary to tell you what they're doing. They may not have the vocabulary at all to express what's going on with them. So they act out. So when you look at behavior as communication, you look at or you try to find out what's the story behind that. What are they trying to tell me? What are they trying to explain to me that's going on with them? Identify challenge in behavior as a symptom of unmet needs. That behavior occurs because there's a need that hasn't been met. Just be aware that sometimes behaviors that our students have is a way to communicate with you. And it's difficult sometimes to understand what they're trying to communicate, but use a lens of looking at what's going on and how can I help that student meet that need that they have. Think about their behavior as communication. So again, looking at their strengths versus their weaknesses, listening with empathy, tuning into the message that's being told with those nonverbal cues, and then look at their behavior as communication or a way to tell you that something's going on and I need some help or some support. All right, so when we're looking at orienting toward optimism, this refers to an attitude of confidence, hopefulness, and positive thinking. Optimism is considered a key protective factor in supporting health, joy, amusement, awe, and happiness while decreasing anxiety and depression. So those protective factors that I mentioned are those things that you call upon in times of that you've experienced some traumatic experiences. Those protective factors are those things that help you get through those situations, through traumatic experiences. So when we recognize our negativity bias, a negativity bias it's an instinctual bias that our brain has toward negativity. It's a survival mechanism. So it prepares your body for fight or flight. So our brain recognizes something negative, and we always assume the worst, and we always hold on to that bad news. We never want to let that stuff go. It always keeps coming back up, in our conversations, in our thinking. Our brain is more protective, and it prepares, like I said, our body to be more protective than those positive experiences that we have. Hypervigilance, as they call it, keeps us on the lookout for danger and keeps us ready to protect ourselves. So when we're aware of our own negativity biases, we're more able to counteract those moments by elevating those positive and situations that we've been in. If we can focus more on the positive things, then it's going to be a better outcome for ourselves and our students as well. And, we want great outcomes for ourselves, but we also want those students to be successful. So recognizing negativity and how it impacts your brain and how it impacts your body reactions. So just be aware of, it's better to look on the bright side, I guess you could say. Sometimes it's difficult, but let's, just try to look on the bright side. Looking at reframing and retraining the brain by directing attention to those positive experiences, we can retrain the brain to better detect positivity. So then that way you're aware of your emotional and physical responses to those positive things, and you can retrain your brain to look for the positive. And practicing gratitude, simply appreciating positive outcomes. Practicing gratitude can foster physical, psychological, and social benefits, and have social benefits. It's, of course, associated with increased happiness, strengthened relationships, decreased anxiety and depression, and increased motivation. So what is something that you're grateful for today? So next thing we want to look at is establishing balance and boundaries. So this is a difficult task a lot of times for new teachers as well as experienced teachers. So boundaries are guidelines that we use to set expectations, responsibilities, and limits for ourselves and other people. Setting those boundaries is sometimes difficult because, we're in that business of helping people, and that's what we want to do. We have a difficult time setting boundaries. And then once you set those boundaries, stick to those boundaries. Then when you establish those balance and boundaries, it's crucial to remain passionate and effective in your work. So setting those balance and setting those boundaries does not deter from your work, but it helps improve your work because you have established those things that are school work related, and these are things that I deal with that no one else, none of the folks here need to worry about. One of the things that we talk about in establishing balances and boundaries is the cost of caring. And the cost of caring is one of those deals. Like I said, we're in the business of helping people. And so the cost of caring comes from bearing witness to and supporting students through their struggles. Not only what am I going through, what are the things that I am facing in my personal life, but looking at the things that our students are going through and how I can help those students. That plays upon you, that weighs you down, burdens you down. Some of our students that are coming from some stressful situations that are demanding of their time and their efforts. So the cost of caring is often called compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, or vicarious trauma. And then all these things can lead to burnout. When you're aware of the cost of caring, you can explore prevention strategies to reduce the risk and increase your resiliency. And resiliency is that ability to bounce back from trying times. With some of our students coming back to us, they've been through a lot, not having that routine, not having that consistency, not having that constant person in their life that is going to be there for them when they need help and provide them with help and provide them with support and encouragement. So just understand that you got to be able to establish what is caring too much. How am I going to separate all the struggles that I'm going through, plus the struggles that my students are going through, to be more productive and helpful to those students. And this is a big one: is forming healthy habits. Strategies for stress management, self-care, and physical health are key to your effectiveness. So nutrition, exercise, and adequate sleep are foundational to combating effects of physical, emotional, mental stress. And a final thing that you would think about as far as establishing balance and boundaries is asking for help and learning to say no. We already discussed asking for help a little bit. When you have a struggle, then reach out to those folks that have some knowledge in what you're struggling with. Ask those folks for help, and most times they're more than willing to help you and provide you with assistance, or are excited or willing to teach you the strategies or the skills that you need. Learn to say no. Often overcommitting and overextending ourselves has an impact on our ability to pursue purpose and focus on our priorities. So being able to say no, being able to stick to that say no helps with, it's all right to say no to someone. It's all right to tell them, I'm already stretched thin as it is. I need some help, or I don't think I could do that with the full attention that it needs to be done. I don't think I would be very successful in handling that task. Ask for help, learn when and how to ask for help, and learn to say no. When we're looking at these 5 competencies developed by transforming education, again, we looked at examining identity, and examining identity looked at defining values and purpose, investigating privilege and power, uncovering bias, and reflecting on work style. When we look at exploring emotions, we looked at labeling your emotions, recognizing physical reactions to those emotions, and responding rather than reacting. When we discussed cultivating compassion and curiosity, we looked at applying an asset-based lens, which was seeing the positive, the strengths that our students have, not the weaknesses. We looked at listening with empathy, listening to not only the words, but the body language, the emotions that are connected to what's being said. And then we looked at viewing behavior as communication. What is the student trying to communicate to me that their need is through this behavior? Now we're looking at orient towards optimism. We said we need to recognize negativity bias, that is focusing on the negative and keeping that stored away. We need to be able to let that go and look at ways that we can see the positive more and focus on the positive. Reframing and retraining the brain. If we reframe the stressors that we have, then we can retrain our brain to acknowledge the positives and focus more on those positive reactions. And then looked at practicing gratitude. When we looked at establishing balance and boundaries, of course, it's understanding the cost of caring. It is difficult to care not only for our private personal lives, but dealing with the students' lives and what's going on with them. Looked at forming healthy habits and then asking for help and learning to say no. I've come to a frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized. So think about that. I think one of the things that stands out to me most of this is that it is my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my mood that makes the weather. I have the power to help that child be miserable or joyous. In all situations, it's my response. So remember, we were talking about reacting and responding. When we respond, we have thought out what we're going to do, and we've planned ahead of what we're going to say and how we're going to respond. When we react, of course, we said that was just a involuntary, spur of the moment, just lash out type of behavior. So I think it is the way that you respond that helps decide how the climate in your classroom goes. Again, I'm Doug Smith with Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and this is Miss Chastity Craft with the co-op as well. If you ever need to get in touch with me, it's doug.smith@hazard.kyschools.us or doug.smith@theholler.org. And Miss Chastity's is chastity.craft@theholler.org. So please feel free to reach out to either one of us or both of us or whatever, and we'll help you as much as we can. Thank you again. I appreciate your attendance and patience, and hopefully we covered a little bit of stuff today that help you get to thinking a little bit about your own social emotional learning and how you can improve. What are our glows, those things that we're good at, and what are our grows? What are those things that we need to improve upon? Thank you, and hopefully you have a safe and productive and fun school year. And just appreciate y'all very much. And like I said, anything we can ever do for you, please feel free to reach out. Thank y'all.
Thanks, guys.